Hello, everybody. The question we're going to answer today is it possible to live a happy life without having distinct boundaries? Let's get right into it.
All right, that's a good question. So, is it possible? Perhaps, but is it possible for you? Is the question. Because I think this is very dependent on the individual and the way they see the world and how they relate to the world. So, the way I go about it, and I can only speak for myself, is I tend to try and think of these things in a formal, systematic manner and consider. So, every time I impose a boundary, uh, there's a cost to me to enforce that boundary. And if I don't enforce it, then there's no point. If I set a boundary and fail to enforce it, it erodes my own credibility and gives other people license to also violate other boundaries. So I have to consider whether that cost is worth it. I also have to consider whether the cost to other people's freedoms or even my own freedom in having that boundary makes it worthwhile to have that boundary. So an excess of boundaries can be a problem. However, I also need to consider what I need to protect myself from and how boundaries might help me do that. Because I recognize that I have a limited attention span. I cannot constantly focus on threats that would not allow me to do anything else. So I do have to set boundaries. And you have to have some kind of system so that you can function. As people, we are creatures of habit. We build routines, and that is how we go about our lives. So I would say that you should have as many rules as you need, but as few as you can have without descending into some kind of unpalatable situation for you. But recognize that each rule has to have a set of exceptions as and when required, and that there has to be enough flexibility within the system for you to be able to adapt to changing situations. Because if you become too set in your ways, if you become too rigid in terms of what you think things should be like, then when circumstances change, you really struggle to adapt to that. So you have to have a system that has enough built-in flexibility that you can deal with whatever life throws at you, and that helps make you more resilient. And that's the way I look at it. I'm sure there are other people who have more of a tolerance to risk and I mean, different types of risk. So more tolerance to perhaps anarchy, maybe more confidence in their own resilience, their own self-belief, that they might think that there is no need to consciously think about these things, or they might have a different mental makeup. Some people would have a lot more rules than I do, because that is what they need to have in order to feel safe. And that sense of emotional safety is what we're going for when we set boundaries. Boundaries are usually about some form of safety that you're seeking.
Long and very thorough answer. I like your perspective.
Thank you.
I would say it is possible. I know that when I was younger, I definitely did not know what boundaries were. That's a concept I've only learned in the past few years. So I was just living my life, doing my thing as a teen. And I did have a happy life. But understanding that happy life does not mean every single minute is always happy, right? Like it is impossible to live a completely stagnant. My life is always at 9 out of 10 emotion positivity. That's not possible. Life has ups and downs. So I guess the happy life is dependent on your perspective of how your life is going and how you are reacting to everything that's happening in your life. But I think your life could be, if your life is unhappy because some things are not going your way and are consistent repeating problems that are causing your life to be worse, or you feel like it's not great right now, then having distinct boundaries is probably going to help your emotional well-being and help you live a happier life. And I think there are ways to communicate your expectations without necessarily labeling them as boundaries with other people, or living your life in such a way that you are a role model for what you expect of yourself and others, that people know not to cross what could be considered boundaries, but you don't need to specify them as such. So if you have a very principled or organized or like a specific lifestyle or something that you're sticking to, then yeah, the boundaries aren't necessarily needed because you're already doing things to take care of yourself, and your lifestyle allows for that. But
So they're unacknowledged boundaries, you're saying?
yes, unacknowledged, not labeled boundaries.
Okay.
And it's, I mean, one way you can think of boundaries is a way to separate you from other people and not like just melding in and like they will come and do
Right.
everything they want to. So if you have like a solid sense of, you know, what is you and what is another person, then you don't need to set the specific boundary. You know that, and the other person, whenever they come close to maybe violating or breaking or hopping the fence with that boundary, then that's a point where, just like for boundaries, you need to push them back and say, hey, no. As kindly and gently as you can, depending on the relationship you have with the person.
Hey, that was a really good answer. I like that. So yeah, I think that boundaries should be set up on a trial and error basis. You learn from what goes wrong in your life, how things make you feel, and then you decide if you need a new boundary there or not. So it's a heuristic learning process. I think that would be the best way to go about it. Akshay, what do you think?
You guys both make a lot of sense. I actually look at it from a very different angle. Is that you don't need to have boundaries if nobody else around you has boundaries. Because if everybody around you has boundaries, they are pushing you. Because the boundaries are not just pushing them; they're also pushing you. And if you have to be okay with every single thing that they're saying, then you would not, not because you want to, but like essentially you sort of become a pushover because of the circumstances that you're necessitated to create your own boundaries. Because if not, it's like two people putting a hand from both sides, and you don't want to be in that situation. And even when you want to sort of create those boundaries, it might, because they've already created it, you can't say, hey, like now I want to create a boundary where like I don't accept your boundary. And issues could come up there, and just creating the boundary might be the reason why you didn't have a happy life. If not, if you were a pushover, maybe you could have had a happy life. Is one of the thoughts that you could be having, and that's some of the things that makes boundaries interesting.
That is pretty cool. Yeah. So what you're saying is that you have to think of these as strategic interactions, right? So then that leads to the question of how do you maintain your boundaries? Maybe we should talk about that tomorrow.
Sounds
Okay,
good.
see you then.
Oh, you're still here? Well, thanks for getting to the end of the video. Hey, while you're still here, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to get new updates when we post videos. Also, make sure to check out these equally exciting videos as well. Have you pressed it yet? Come on, you have 5 seconds left. 3, 2, press it now.